Hello again, everyone. This is the practice problem video for chapter 7. So I'm going to jump right in here to exercise 7-6, titled Cost Hierarchy. And the setup here said Flash Express purchases USB flash drives from suppliers, so this is a wholesale basis, and then applies corporate logos to the exterior of those flash drives for customers. The company maintains a dedicated piece of equipment for each type of product that it processes, such as the top hat flash drive, credit card flash drive, swing flash drive, and wristband flash drives. The company defines its batches, so that'll be important for us, based on customer orders. For example, if one customer places an order for 1,000 credit card flash drives, that order would be processed as one batch and would be shipped as one batch. If another customer places an order for 100 top hat flash drives, 100 swing flash drives, and 100 wristband flash drives, that order would be processed as 3 batches, so one for each of the types, but then shipped as one batch. So we've got some activities listed here, A through H, and we're going to classify them according to our activity-based costing hierarchy principles as either unit level, batch level, product level, customer level, or org sustaining. Feel free to revisit those concepts and definitions before attempting this if you'd like. But I'm just going to keep kind of rolling with the video here and going over each of these activities. So A said sales representatives' periodic visits to customers to keep them informed about the company's existing products and its new product introductions. So this is an activity that is conducted at the customer level, right? Let's say the company has 100 customers. This implies they're going to visit each of those 100 customers maybe weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on, to keep them informed about what's coming down the pipeline in terms of products and what we can hopefully sell to them in the future. So a great example though of a customer level activity. Customer level activities, those that are conducted once or on a periodic basis anyway, per customer. And that's independent of how many different products the customer buys or is interested in, how many different batches they order, how many units they get shipped to them, and so on. Next up, B said engaging in price negotiations with the company's supplier of credit card flash drives. So from our setup information, we know that the credit card flash drive is one particular product line that the company offers. So since this price negotiation would presumably be carried out one time, at least on a periodic basis, maybe we have to renegotiate the contract every year, every 6 months, whatever. That implies it is a product level activity. Okay, we've got a different supplier maybe for some of the other products that we offer, but this price negotiation with the supplier of just this one type of product is a product level activity. Okay, remember those product level activities, things that are done once or on a periodic basis for the whole product line. So again, independent of volume, doesn't matter how many batches of the credit card flash drives we make, how many units we sell, and so on. This activity is happening, once per product line. Letter C, we had programming and calibrating the top hat logo application machine so that it properly applies the logo for a specific customer's production run. So customers' production runs here were done in batches. So right off the bat then we can safely say this is a batch level activity. Okay, we're going to set up that machine to run 1,000 flash drives for customer A. Then we're going to set it up again to run 1,000 for customer B, and so on and so on. So batch level activity is done once per some group of units of product. D, we had visually inspecting each flash drive that has been produced to ensure that the logo has been applied in a defect-free manner. So some quality control here, making sure we don't ship ugly stuff to the customer here where their logo is all messed up. So a good clue for us in the early part of this sentence then was visually inspecting each flash drive. It means every single one that's made we're inspecting for this quality control. So because of that, it's considered or would be considered a unit level activity. Okay, we're doing it for every single unit that we make. If instead we had said that this was visually inspecting, a random sample of flash drives, one out of every 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever, then we'd consider it a batch level activity, right? Once per group of units. Since we're doing every one, again, let's stick with unit level activity there. Okay, letter E said preparing shipping documents and packaging for a customer order. So a customer order, according to our setup here, can consist of several batches, right, of produced flash drives, but we're always going to be shipping these things as one batch. So we'll probably consider this a batch level activity. Now you could also make potentially the case that this is a customer level activity, given what we learned in that setup information. So this one, I would suggest there probably is a little gray area there. Either one of these I would consider acceptable. You could convince me either one of those kind of works. Okay, letter F said periodic maintenance of the equipment used to process wristband flash drives. Now, periodic maintenance implies that we're going to do this, once a month, once a quarter, once a year, whatever, and that it is likely fairly independent of volume. So because of that, let's consider this organization sustaining. Okay? All those sort of giant overhead type activities that are necessary for keeping the whole production process up and running, but aren't necessarily dependent on volume. Now that one too, you may be thinking, well, isn't that some kind of batch level activity? Doesn't it kind of depend on how many units we're cranking out? And sure, in the long run, you could convince me that the more units we make, the more maintenance we might have to do, right? If you think about your car, the more miles you drive, the more times you have to get the oil changed. So we might start to get into that type of discussion here. But for the most part, we can consider that type of stuff org sustaining. G said lighting and heating the company's production facility. Now, lighting and heating for sure is independent of volume. So that stuff very much org sustaining in nature. Okay, we've got the lights and the heat on, even if we don't produce anything for a given day or week or month or whatever. And then very last was H, preparation of the company's quarterly financial reports. So that's independent of volume. That's independent of how many different types of products we sell, how many customers we have or serve, and everything in between. So there's another one that's a good fit for organization sustaining. Okay, I'm actually going to jump back just a little bit here to exercise 7.3. And that was to calculate some activity rates. So in our activity-based costing system that you read about in chapter 7 here, we have something that's similar to our predetermined overhead rates from our traditional costing systems in earlier chapters, but it's at a lower level of detail or granularity, right? We have these activity rates based on estimated costs for our individual activities within our processes. So let's see what 7.3 says. Green Thumb Gardening is a small gardening service that uses activity-based costing to estimate costs for pricing and other purposes. The proprietor of the company believes that costs are driven primarily by the size of customer lawns, the size of customer garden beds, the distance to travel to customers, and the number of customers. In addition, the cost of maintaining the garden beds depends on whether the beds are low maintenance beds, mainly ordinary trees and shrubs, or high maintenance beds, mainly flowers and exotic plants. Accordingly, the company uses the 5 activity cost pools listed below here. So we've got caring for the lawn, caring for each of the types of garden beds, low and high maintenance, travel to jobs, and then the customer billing and service. We also have that activity measure or that cost driver that's already been defined. Square feet of lawn in terms of caring for the lawn, and all the way down here. Now it also said the company has completed its first stage allocation of costs and has summarized its annual costs and activity as follows. So here's all the estimated overhead costs that's been assigned to each of those activity cost pools. $72,000 in the caring for lawn cost pool, $26,400 in that low maintenance garden bed care activity cost pool, and so on and so forth. And what we want to do is come up with activity rates for each of those activity cost pools. So as I alluded to earlier, our activity rates really operate in a very similar manner to our predetermined overhead rates from our traditional costing systems back in chapters 2, 3, and 4, our job order costing and our process costing. And by that, I really mean it's still an estimated overhead cost divided by some estimated or expected activity level to come up with that activity rate. Similar to the way our predetermined overhead rates in those systems were just total estimated overhead divided by total estimated activity or allocation base. Right? So fundamentally kind of the same idea here. So let's come up with a rate for that caring for lawn activity. We had estimated overhead cost of $72,000 assigned to that activity cost pool. So if we divide that by the 150,000 square feet of lawn that we expect to care for in the upcoming period here, that gives us an activity rate of 48 cents. And just be careful with our unit of measure, we might as well note that. That's per square foot of lawn. Okay, so for every foot by foot piece of the lawn, we're saying that's about 48 cents in caring for lawn costs. All the stuff that goes into that activity. Let's move on here to the caring for, I'm going to abbreviate, garden beds, and this is low maintenance. That had estimated overhead cost of $26,400. So we'll divide that by the 20,000 square feet of low maintenance beds that we expect to take care of. And there's our activity rate of $1.32. And again, this is per square foot of the low maintenance bed. Next, we had caring for the garden beds of the high maintenance variety. So it costs us more to do that. That makes sense, or we think it will anyway. Estimated overhead cost $41,400. Let's divide that by the 15,000 square feet of high maintenance beds we expect to care for in the coming period. And there's $2.76 per square foot. It's a little more than twice as much to care for the high maintenance beds as to care for the low maintenance beds. Hopefully our billing to customers reflects that. Next up, we had travel to jobs. Our estimated overhead cost there, $3,250. And we expected to cover 12,500 miles traveling back and forth to jobs here. So we divide that out and we get 26 cents, and that's per mile. And then last but not least, we had customer billing and service. So that's providing bills to the customers, taking calls from them, answering complaints, concerns, all those types of things. We expected the overhead cost associated with that to be $8,750. So we'll divide that by the 25 customers we think we're going to be serving here in this upcoming period. And that gives us an activity rate of $350, and that's per customer. And I'll just note real quick here, it's not part of this problem, but when we go to assign overhead to a cost object, so either to a customer or a product line or whatever, we're just taking that activity rate, or those activity rates plural, and multiplying those by our actual activity for that period. Again, very analogous to what we did in our traditional costing systems in earlier chapters. Point being, we can come up with some ideas about what customers or what products are most profitable after we've assigned all those costs that are incurred to kind of service those products, produce those products, or serve those customers. Okay, now I'm going to jump down the page a bit to exercise 7-11. And now we'll actually get to assign some overhead costs and come up with some profitability or margin calculations here. So 7-Eleven said Foam Products Inc. makes foam seat cushions for the auto and aerospace industries. The company's activity-based costing system has these 4 activity cost pools listed with our activity measure and then that activity rate. So what we had just calculated in the previous exercise, essentially. The company just completed a single order from Interstate Trucking for 1,000 custom seat cushions. That order was produced in 2 batches. Each cushion requires 0.25 direct labor hours. The selling price is $20 per unit. The direct materials cost is $8.50 per unit. And the direct labor cost was $6 per unit. This was Interstate Trucking's only order during the year. So the required part said, using this Exhibit 712 as a guide, calculate the customer margin on sales to Interstate Trucking for the year. So I'm not going to pull up that exhibit. Customer margin, what we're really saying is profitability from that customer, right? From dealing with that customer. So the best place to start there is to think of this almost like an income statement, right? Because essentially that's what we're doing, just at an individual customer level. So let's figure out what our sales revenue was from this customer for that period. They purchased 1,000 custom seat cushions, and that was their only order for the year. And we sold these things to them for $20 per unit, okay, on average. So revenue from that customer is $20,000. Now, the first thing we want to deduct from that in terms of figuring out this customer margin is all the direct costs. Okay, so I'm even going to just say direct costs first. We've got some direct materials, and we also know a little bit about direct labor. So direct materials costs we know to be $8.50 per cushion. And again, they made one order in this year, and that was for 1,000 cushions. So direct materials cost $8.50 times 1,000. Direct labor, let's see what happened here. We knew this to be 0.25 direct labor hours to do one cushion here. And they already told us that the direct labor cost for that quarter hour was $6 per unit. So we didn't even need to worry about a wage rate, although we could figure out what that is. $6 times 1,000 seat cushions ordered means direct labor cost was $6,000. So I'm actually going to subtotal the direct costs here, direct materials plus direct labor, for a total of $14,500. Now let's go ahead and apply the indirect costs, all the overhead costs. I'm going to do these line by line just to make sure we kind of keep everything separate, and then we'll aggregate it at the end. So when we go to assign overhead costs, we just take all those activity cost pools. We take the actual activity for that cost object, so in this case the Interstate Trucking customer, and assign that cost based on the activity rates for each activity cost pool. So first up, we had the supporting direct labor. That was $5.55 per direct labor hour. So let's just be careful there. We're going to multiply that by the 1,000 seat cushions that Interstate Trucking ordered times the 0.25 direct labor hours that each cushion takes. Okay. In other words, what's shown in the parentheses here is the total direct labor hours required to fill this one order they had during the year. 1,000 seat cushions times a quarter hour, or 250 labor hours. So that times our activity rate of $5.55 per direct labor hour. 1,387 and some change. Then we had batch processing costs here. And those were $107 per batch. And it told us in the setup information that their one order of 1,000 cushions was produced in 2 batches. So half and half. So $107 per batch times oops, 2 batches, or $214. Just a couple more. We had order processing costs. Those are $275 per order, and they only made one order during this year. So just to be explicit, this is times one order. 275 total. And then we had some customer service costs, all the costs associated with us keeping them as a customer, keeping them happy. This was $2,463 per customer. That's the activity rate. And again, just to be explicit, times one customer. Interstate trucking is one customer. So there's our customer service costs. So let's get total overhead cost here. And again, I'm going to avoid the cell reference and use the numbers explicitly just to be clear. This is the supporting direct labor cost, plus the batch processing cost, plus order processing, plus customer service. So there's the total overhead cost assigned to this interstate trucking customer. So that customer margin then becomes the revenue from that customer, $20,000, minus the direct costs of servicing that customer, $14,500, minus all those assigned overhead costs, $4,339.50. So that customer margin, $1,160.50. So all else equal, if our ABC system is doing a good job getting costs assigned to individual cost pools, and we have some confidence in our estimates of activity and therefore activity rates, we would say that this customer, interstate trucking, is a profitable customer. It's profitable for us to continue working with them. Okay, make a little bit of money on what we sell them. All right, I had one more problem I wanted to look at here, and this was exercise 7-13. And that said, Fogarty Company makes 2 products, titanium hubs and sprockets. Data regarding the 2 products follows here, so we know the direct labor hours required to make 1 unit of each, and we know the annual production level of each. We also know that the hubs require $32 in direct materials per unit, sprockets require $18. The direct labor wage rate is $15 an hour. Hubs require some special equipment and are more complex to manufacture. We also know that the ABC system has defined 3 activity cost pools here: machine setups based on number of setups, special processing based on machine hours, and then general factory costs based on org sustaining measures, if you will. Now, right off the bat, I'll just point out quick, the reason we have NAs here for the org sustaining, if you recall from Chapter 7, we do not assign org sustaining costs to individual products or customers or any cost object like that. Okay, there's certainly a cost of doing business, often a very significant or substantial one, but we do not assign them to individual products or customers. We don't want to distort the potential profitability or our view of that potential profitability of individual customers or products by assigning those types of costs. Okay, so first up here said, compute the activity rate for each activity cost pool. Did you compute an activity rate for all of the activity cost pools, and why? So I guess I kind of tipped the hand on that one, but let's find out the activity rate for the other 2 activity cost pools, and then we'll come back to that third point. So machine setups had total estimated overhead cost assigned to that cost pool of $72,000. We want to divide that then by, be careful here, the total expected activity across all products. Remember, our activity rate should reflect all of our production, shouldn't be on any kind of product by product basis. So $72,000 in estimated cost divided by the 400 expected setups we're going to do across both those products. And there's a rate of $180 per setup. Same idea for special processing. We had estimated overhead costs there of $200,000, and we'll divide that, just to be explicit here, by the total expected machine hours of 5,000 across both products. So there's a rate of $40 per machine hour. And again, our general factory activity cost pool, we don't have an activity rate there because we're not going to assign that to any product or customer or any cost object. Okay, number 2, or the second part of that, then wanted us to determine the unit product cost of each product using this ABC system. So let's do this. Let's say hubs and sprockets, we'll put them side by side so we can keep track of all the costs here. Now remember, if we're looking for a product cost, or a product margin for that matter too, we do want to make sure we include all the direct costs as well. So here's our direct materials, our direct labor, and then I'm going to include those overhead costs, the machine setups activity cost pool, and then that special processing as well. So let's start with the hubs. Those things take $32 in direct materials per unit, and throughout the year we expect to make 10,000 units. So 32 bucks times 10,000, and there's our total direct materials cost of 320,000. Direct labor, we have a wage rate given in B of $15 per hour. So we'll multiply that by the 10,000 units we intend to make times the 0.8 hours each one takes to make. Okay, so all we're doing in the parentheses there is coming up with the total labor hours required to just produce the hubs. 10,000 units times the 0.8 hours it takes per unit. So there's total labor cost, 120,000. Then we had the machine setups. We just figured out that the rate for that was $180 per setup. So we'll multiply that by the 100 setups that we think we're going to need to perform to make all these hubs. And then special processing, we had $40 per machine hour. And we'll multiply that, again, just to be explicit here, by the 5,000 machine hours required for special processing of the hubs. And let's also come up with the total product cost. Again, I'll try to remember to avoid cell references here. We've got direct materials plus the direct labor plus the machine setups costs plus that special processing of 200,000. Total cost of 658,000. Unit costed for the hubs, we'll take that total cost of 658,000 and divide it back by the 10,000 individual hub units we intend to make per year. Okay, so $65.80. Let's do the same thing for the sprockets then. Direct materials are just $18 per unit, and we're going to make 40,000 units of the sprockets. Direct labor, we had that wage rate of $15 per hour. We'll multiply that by the 40,000 units we're making of the sprockets times the 0.4 hours per unit it takes in labor to do that. So again, what's in the parentheses here is the total labor hours required to make all these sprockets. There's our labor cost. Machine setups, that rate was $180 per setup from part 1 times the 300 setups that we need to execute to make all these sprockets. Almost done. Special processing, again, just to be explicit here, $40 per hour times the 0 hours we need in special processing. So then our total becomes the direct materials plus that direct labor plus just the machine setups, over $1 million. Take that total cost, divide by the 40,000 units of sprockets we're going to make, And there's our unit product cost, $25.35. Okay, that wraps up the practice problems for Chapter 7. Feel free to back up and view any a second time if you'd like. As always, reach out with any questions. The big ticket items here for Chapter 7 with our activity-based costing is understanding what is an activity cost pool, right? How we allocate costs to it, how we use that then to come up with activity rates, and then how we use those activity rates to assign costs to products, customers, and so on. Okay. So we also want to keep track of these cost hierarchy principles, like the ones we practice in exercise 7.6. So be sure to review those as much as you feel is necessary. And then you also want to be able to come up with customer and product margins or profitability after we've assigned all these costs. So again, reach out with any questions you have, and we'll quote unquote talk next time.